Come pick up your useless daughter. I don't want her anymore. My husband, Ethan, said it over the phone while I was standing 10 feet away. He didn't even lower his voice. My mother-in-law was beside him, smiling. I had just been served divorce papers. After 8 years of marriage, Ethan wanted me out of the house immediately. Then he called my mother. She's your problem now. My mother listened quietly. Then she said one sentence. Keep the phone on. She hung up. Ethan laughed. What is she going to do? I didn't answer, because there was something Ethan didn't know. My mother wasn't coming alone. Exactly 1 minute later, we heard engines outside. One, then another, then another. I walked toward the window. 6 black SUVs were pulling into our driveway. Every vehicle was identical, tinted windows, professional drivers. Security guards stepped out first. Ethan's smile disappeared. What the hell is this? I looked at him. My mother. He laughed nervously. Your mother doesn't own 6 SUVs. No, I said quietly. She owns something much bigger. And Ethan was about to discover why my mother had never been impressed by his money. The first SUV stopped directly in front of our house. My mother stepped out. She was wearing a simple black suit. No jewelry, no dramatic expression. She walked straight toward the front door. Behind her, 2 security officers followed. Ethan opened the door. Who are these people? Mom ignored him. She looked at me. Are you okay, sweetheart? I nodded. Then she turned to Ethan. So, you're the man who called my daughter useless? Ethan suddenly looked uncomfortable. I was angry. Mom smiled. I understand. Then she looked past him. Where are her belongings? Ethan pointed toward the hallway. She can take whatever she brought into the marriage. Mom's smile disappeared. That won't be necessary. She snapped her fingers. 2 men entered. They carefully began packing my personal belongings. Ethan stepped forward. You can't just come into my house? Mom looked at him calmly. Actually, I can. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Mom didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a folder. Inside was a copy of our original property agreement. My name was on it, so was hers. I stared at the document. You never told me this. I wanted you to have a normal marriage, Mom said, not a marriage controlled by my money. Ethan went completely still. Your money? Mom looked at him. Yes. Then she smiled politely. Did you really think my daughter married you because she needed your house? Ethan's face went pale, but that wasn't even the worst part. Mom opened another folder, and this one had Ethan's company name on it. Ethan stared at the folder. Why do you have my company records? Mom sat down calmly. Because your company has been using my daughter's money. Ethan immediately looked at me. What is she talking about? I shook my head. I didn't know. Mom opened the folder. 5 years earlier, Ethan's company had nearly collapsed. He had told me he saved it with a private investment. That wasn't true. My mother had quietly invested in the company, not as a gift, as a protected business loan. Ethan had signed the agreement himself. He knew exactly who the investor was. He just never told me. Mom pointed to the final page. Your company still owes my family a substantial amount. Ethan's face changed. You can't call that in now. I don't have to. Mom closed the folder. The loan matured last month? Silence. Ethan suddenly understood. His company wasn't as independent as he had claimed. My mother controlled the debt, and the 6 SUVs outside weren't there to intimidate him. They belonged to her private security team. Ethan looked at me. You knew about this? No. He stared at me. For the first time, I saw fear instead of arrogance. Then Mom stood. Come on, sweetheart. I picked up my suitcase. As I walked toward the door, Ethan suddenly grabbed his phone. Wait! Mom stopped. He looked at her desperately. If you take her away, what happens to my company? Mom looked back at him. That's not your concern anymore. Then she opened the car door for me, and Ethan finally realized he hadn't thrown out a useless wife. He had just insulted the daughter of the woman who could destroy his entire financial empire. The SUV door closed behind me. For the first time in 8 years, I felt safe, but I still had questions. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about Ethan's company? She looked at me. Because I wanted you to believe your marriage was real. My eyes filled with tears. Wasn't it? She took my hand. I don't know, sweetheart. That's something you have to decide. We drove to a private hotel owned by our family. Mom had already arranged a room for me. Then she gave me another folder. Inside were bank records. I stared at the numbers. Over the last 4 years, Ethan had quietly transferred money from our joint account into his company. He had called them business expenses. But the records showed something else. He had used that money to pay personal debts, luxury purchases, private vacations, even payments to his mother. I felt sick. Why didn't the bank stop this? Because you were married, Mom said. He had access. Then she showed me one final document, a transfer authorization. My signature was on it. I froze. I never signed this, Mom nodded. That is why your attorney is waiting downstairs. My heart started racing. You hired an attorney? I hired the best one I could find. She squeezed my hand, because this isn't just a divorce anymore. I looked at the document again. Someone had copied my signature, and whoever did it had access to every financial account I shared with Ethan. My attorney, Daniel Brooks, entered the room. He had already reviewed the financial records. I need you to understand something, he said. This could become a serious legal matter. I nodded. Because of the forged signature? Yes. He explained that we first needed to prove who created the document. Then he showed me something unexpected. The transfer had been made from an account Ethan controlled, but the computer used to authorize it was registered to his office. I stared at the screen. Could someone else have used it? Possibly. Daniel pointed to another record. But there's more. A second transfer had been made 3 days later. Same computer, same account, same signature. Then he opened the company records. Both transfers had eventually gone to Ethan's mother. I couldn't believe it. My mother-in-law, Daniel nodded. She received nearly $180,000. I felt betrayed all over again. Mom sat beside me. You don't have to decide anything tonight. But I knew I had to act. I asked Daniel to freeze every account I legally controlled. He did. Then I asked about the house. He smiled slightly. That's where your mother planned ahead. He showed me the property agreement. My mother had purchased the house years before my marriage. She had allowed Ethan and me to live there under a family use agreement. Ethan had never owned it, not even once. I stared at the document. Then I remembered his words, "Come pick up your useless daughter." He had thrown me out of a house that was never his. But I still wasn't ready for what happened next, because Ethan called me that night and begged me to come home. I answered Ethan's call. Please come home. His voice sounded completely different. No arrogance, no anger, just fear. Why? We need to talk. We already talked. I made a mistake. I looked at Mom. She didn't interrupt. Ethan continued. My mother was upset. I was angry. I shouldn't have said those things. You didn't just insult me. I paused. You told my mother to come collect her useless daughter. I know. And then you tried to make me leave my own home. He went silent. Finally, he said, I didn't know it was your mother's house. I almost laughed. You didn't know? No, but you signed the property agreement. Silence. That was the moment I knew he was lying. Daniel had already checked the documents. Ethan had signed them 8 years earlier. He knew exactly who owned the property. Then Ethan said something that made my stomach turn. Your mother is destroying my life. I looked at Mom. She isn't doing anything to you. She froze the company loan. I understood. His company had missed the repayment deadline. Now my mother was legally entitled to demand payment. Ethan begged me to convince her to wait. I asked one question. Did you ever love me? He didn't answer. Instead, he said, if you come back, I'll fix everything. I closed my eyes. Then I remembered the 6 black SUVs, the folder, the forged signature, the stolen money, and suddenly I knew exactly what I was going to do. I told him, I'm coming back, but not as his wife, as the woman who was finally going to expose everything. The next morning, I returned to the house. Not alone, my attorney came with me. Mom stayed in the SUV outside. Ethan opened the door. He looked exhausted. I knew you'd come back. I didn't come back for you. I walked inside. My suitcase stayed in the car. Daniel placed a folder on the table. We need answers. Ethan looked at him. About what? The transfers. His face changed. Then Daniel placed the first bank statement in front of him. $180,000 was transferred to your mother's account. Ethan said nothing. Then we have the forged authorization. He looked at me. I didn't forge anything. Then you won't mind an investigation. His eyes dropped. For the first time, he couldn't control the conversation. Then his mother entered the room. She had been waiting upstairs. You're humiliating my son? I turned toward her. You called me useless. She crossed her arms. You've always been selfish. I opened the final folder. Then explain this. It contained messages between her and Ethan, messages discussing the transfers, messages discussing my credit, and one message sent the night before the divorce. Once she's gone, we can sell the company shares. My mother-in-law went silent. Ethan stared at the message. You said you deleted those. She looked at him. I thought I did. Daniel quietly collected the phone. "We're done here." But before I left, Ethan stopped me. "Please." I turned. He looked broken. "Don't let Mom destroy me." I shook my head. "She didn't destroy you. You did that yourself." The investigation lasted several months. The financial records told the story clearly. Ethan had transferred money from our joint account. His mother had received it. Company records showed they had planned to hide the transfers. The forged signature became part of the investigation. My attorney helped separate my personal finances from Ethan's business debts. And because my mother owned the house, Ethan had no claim to it. The divorce was finalized. I kept nothing that wasn't legally mine. I didn't want his company. I didn't want his money. I only wanted my freedom. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan's company was eventually sold. The proceeds went toward its legitimate debts. His mother moved away, and Ethan started working for another company. One afternoon, I received an email from him. I almost deleted it, but I opened it. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask me to come back. He apologized. "I called you useless because I wanted to feel powerful. I thought you needed me. I was wrong." I read the message twice. Then I closed my laptop. I didn't hate him. I simply didn't recognize the man I had married anymore. My mother walked into the room. "Are you okay?" I smiled. "Yes." She hugged me. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You were never useless. You were just surrounded by people who benefited from making you feel small." For the first time in years, I believed her. A year after the divorce, I moved into my own apartment. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't expensive, but everything inside it belonged to me. I started a small consulting business. I used the skills I had developed during my marriage. Within months, I had my first major client, then another. I was finally building a life without Ethan. One evening, Mom invited me to dinner. When I arrived, 6 black SUVs were parked outside. I laughed. "Mom, seriously?" She smiled. "You know I like making an entrance." We sat together. I told her about my business. She looked proud. Then she said, "Do you remember what Ethan called you?" I nodded. "Useless." Mom shook her head. "He was wrong." She raised her glass. "To my daughter," I smiled. "To starting over." That night, I realized something. The 6 SUVs weren't the revenge. The money wasn't the revenge. And exposing Ethan wasn't even the revenge. The real victory was discovering that I could build a life without needing anyone to tell me I was valuable. Ethan had called my mother because he thought she was coming to collect her useless daughter. Instead, she arrived with 6 black SUVs, an attorney, financial records, and the truth. He thought he was throwing me away. He didn't realize he was giving me the freedom to become someone he could never control again.